You're listening to Tapasya Loading, a boutique podcast for the holistic creative. And I'm going to be doing a solo cast for you folks today. This episode is brought to you by the Holistic Musician Academy and safeandsound.studio. Mentoring for serious creatives looking for deep support. For musicians and artists, I have a free course for you. 6 days, 1 map, real change. Please go to holisticmusicianacademy.com and click on free training. For vocation agnostic coaching and facilitation inquiries, please go to safeandsound.studio. I'm TL Mazumdar, pianist, songwriter, educator. Let's stoke the fire. I think I was just about a year old. In fact, I'm gonna get on a call ASAP to check this fact with my mum right after I finished recording this session. I think I was just about a year old, let's keep it at that, when my first babysitter took me into her home. She was a tenured professor from Ankara, Turkey, who'd moved abroad, just like my parents, in the hope of a better life for her family. Highly qualified expat, impeccable credentials, but her English wasn't considered fluent enough to teach. So instead of shrinking herself into a job beneath her, she went a different route and set up a small daycare center in her home for the children of the neighborhood or the building, I think. Again, facts I need to confirm later on. People tend to underestimate the manner in which the feminine intelligence transfers to some of the most primordial instincts in humans. One of the first things she made clear, my babysitter, to the mothers at her doorstep was the shape of her offer. High quality care for only 6 children at prices slightly higher than what most day care centers charged locally at the time. But complete responsibility, home cooked, organic by default at the time, organic food at the family table. She was going to care for these children the way she cared for her own 2 young daughters. One of the first women at her doorstep was my mother, who'd just signed a contract to start working after her unofficial maternity leave, as the family, my parents, tried to build a life from scratch, still traveling amongst multiple countries, figuring things out, but with a base in this Mediterranean city. But my mother's question was a different one entirely. How much do you plan to charge for taking care of all these children? And when she heard the reply, her response was instant. I will pay you the entire fee if you take care of only my son. And within minutes, the 2 women had a deal. For the longest time, this was an amusing anecdote, sitting on top of the whirlwind of my quaint but somewhat turbulent early years. Years in which we moved countries, cities, and homes about 10 times, if I'm not mistaken, before I turned the age of 9. The country I spent the earliest 5 years in was declared a dictatorship by the media months after my family fled, really, sensing the unrest that eventually led to war. Some of my childhood friends still tell me stories of driving across the desert in the middle of the night with missiles flying over their heads. And it's only in recent years that I've realized that that doorstep negotiation might have been one of my earliest lessons in understanding the concept of worth and the slippery slope it can be into the territory of privilege. Because, let's be honest, not all mothers can afford to do what mine did. And some hardcore skeptics will find the premise even greedy from a certain lens. The only advice I have for the latter, by the way, is this: don't even think about messing with my mom. Really, you don't want to try. Jokes apart though, that privilege many would assume a woman like her grew up steeped in was an entirely different story. She was the youngest of 6 siblings, torn across worlds after the British partition of the Indian subcontinent, arriving as a refugee in what was now a new country, carried across borders as a baby amidst communal war in the arms of her 14-year-old brother. Sounds too unreal to be true, right? That's the woman who decided I was worth the attention of 6 children. A girl told in 3rd grade that she would have to quit school because there were no funds. Growing up in households amidst extended families, often without her parents, eventually finishing medical college on scholarships and building one of the most successful careers of a generation, not as a woman doctor, but a doctor. Gold medals, national awards, celebrity patients, the lot. But most importantly, a village of people who still line up to show her their love in a queue so long that I've had to fight my way amidst the chaos on some days. My mom is the original Slumdog Millionaire. It wasn't a movie, it was my mom. To this day, she still practices medicine in her 70s. And I had to negotiate for weeks to make sure that the new car she buys, while sorting out property particulars after my dad's demise, isn't a just tiny enough set of wheels, but one where she gets to be the queen she has always been. The woman who considered me more valuable than anyone I know still has to be fought against for me to return the gesture. Hold that thought. It matters later. Here is where the anecdote stopped being an anecdote for me. For most of my adult life, I seem to have carried an unspoken assumption that worth is something I have to prove before anyone is allowed to name it. That I earn recognition first, and only then does someone get to say what I'm worth, even if that someone is me. It seemed so self-evident that I never actually thought to examine it for the longest time. And it's only recently that I've pondered about that incident at the doorstep when 2 women negotiated the value of a toddler who had accomplished exactly nothing and decided within minutes what his care was worth. Neither of them sought evidence. Neither of them apologized for the number, and the agreement took minutes. Both women were fluent in the same language, and it wasn't English, Arabic, Bengali, Hindi, German, or Turkish. The 6 languages the mix of my first babbles comprised of, by the way. I started noticing as well the absence of a question my mother never asked. The objective worth of her son. That number never existed for her. She only asked that the arrangement would reflect what my care was worth to her. And I've come to suspect that it was a quote-unquote value never discovered, but decided by not deciding. But knowing in ways that defy knowledge. I've also found myself observing what the professor, the first woman my mother trusted her son to take care of, was protecting when she capped her little daycare at 6 children, not 7, 8, 10, 11 or 12, like many others were. She had simply decided what her care was. The same process she used to care for her own daughters, with no thoughts of diluting it into anything less. There's an old word for that. One that's largely fallen out of fashion in a society of scale. And that word is honor. Now I contributed nothing to that arrangement. I just learned a few Turkish sentences along the way that I've forgotten now, and spent a year with a family I'll probably never even meet again. These two women simply decided I was worth the attention of 6 humans, and that was that. And the decades taken for me to understand what a radical act that is feel like an intricately designed blur when I think about it now. There's a verdict we keep waiting for. Now, I've spent over 3 decades as an artist, amongst artists, creatives of all kinds, following my bliss. A vocation, by the way, my mum, the same woman, giggled at my first declaration of. We'll talk about that another time. There's another act I thought was radical at the time. Another decision often labeled a privilege. Another story for yet another day. But I've watched what most of us folks in this world of ours do, with or without thinking of ourselves as artists. Outsourcing that decision. Waiting for external evidence to put a number on our worth. Metrics, stats. The label, the manager, the playlist, the committee, the boss, the employees, an algorithm, a fucking robot, an entire industry, a society, a world built on the promise of eventually informing us what we are worth, with a never-ending queue for that verdict, which, when it arrives, by the way, is never final and always dangling a carrot. A dangling carrot with the demand for another round of evidence to submit as soon as possible. This year, this month, this week. My mother, on the other hand, skipped the entire courtroom and headed straight to a doorstep and never looked back. And I feel that it's worth sitting on how foreign that feels in today's world, regardless of how our earliest caregivers have treated us. Because somewhere along the way, most of us, I'd guess, invariably ended up robbing someone of the opportunity to simply love us for who we are, asking for nothing in return. While we were caught up being busy paying our dues, and receiving kept feeling like an increasingly flawed proposition to consider. Most of us tend to be a lot more adept at estimating worth when it comes to someone else. My mother, the woman who understood value, still wants to buy just enough cars for her own transport, while she travels and works in the city of 14 million people and diagnoses approximately at least 20 patients a day. And I've started noticing the identical reflex in humans a lot more acutely of late. This is the epiphany that seems to be rearranging how I engage with people of late, and vice versa. It's not a technique I learned at a workshop or some weekend retreat on an island. It was just a quick, no-nonsense conversation between 2 women who apparently didn't speak each other's language, in a foreign country just a few years away from a war. I have no idea where that family is today, but every now and then the odd Turkish word finds its way to my tongue. Maybe that's just Berlin and the neighborhoods I cycle through on my daily commutes, but it won't stop me from remembering them and wondering, hopeless romantic that I am, if that might be them doing just the same. Have a good week.
Hey folks, I hope you found that episode helpful. Here's a little request. If you did, consider sharing this episode with your folks. Think about the ways in which they might benefit the way you did. And please don't ever hesitate to reach out if you have queries. My name's TL. I'm an independent musician and educator and the founder of the Holistic Musician Academy.